Okay. Right, is that you there, Paul? Just checking on the audio for me? Right. Okay, that should be working. I'm just gonna... Paulie there? I'm just gonna check that audio is working. Looks like Paul is there. Why aren't you coming up in my chat there? It's just a very latent chat. You have Paul Mitchell there. You can let me know if there's any issues with sound quality. And I will be able to see if I need to cut any of this out before it gets published afterwards. Let's look at the OBS. Excellent. Yeah, so today I am going to be doing some painting on this guy who the autofocus doesn't like it when it's pure white, but apart from that, once he's got some colour on, it's going to come up quite nicely. This is a Hero Forge mini for my husband's character in our current campaign, which I'm running as a DM for the first time. He is a handsome devil, Paul. Yes, so Paul's in the chat at the moment. I need to see if I can get OBS putting the chat overview on, but that'll be on the replay, I think. Yeah, so we're going to do some painting of him. I'm actually going to close the door quickly there. Alright, so those of you who might not be as familiar with Dungeons and Dragons, this is a Goliath character, so they're the half giants, and he's going to have basically very, very greyish, white, pale skin. So I'm probably going to be doing his skin in mostly tones of grey sear. That I'll build up a palette for that. However, haven't done too much painting recently, and I feel that painting skin tones by hand is something I kind of want to warm up to. So I was having a think about what I want to do in terms of the palette of all this. Also, I should point out, this was my first attempt at... Oh, let's do the beauty vlog, I think. This was my little first attempt at doing some sculpting with green stuff. So this character, for various reasons I won't go into, because there might be other members of the campaign that I don't want to give secrets away, has an anchor on a chain for a weapon. And that wasn't an option in Hero Forge, so I had to sort of create a version for that, which turned out well enough, I think. I think the thing to always keep in mind with this, as I've talked about before, is that it doesn't need to be perfect. And minis are always viewed from very, very far away, which it's similar to stage makeup and props at a theatre. Because they're being seen from so far away, you can get away with a bit, but you also need to make things a lot larger than life. So one of the things Hero Forge does, which some people aren't as big a fan of, it's not so bad in the male characters, it's a bit more obvious in the female characters, is they do give their minis a bit of a heroic scale. So it's not a complete one-to-one scale. They do tend to have larger, like if you look at the size of the shoulder pads on anything, if anyone's ever played World of Warcraft or anything like that, they'll have massive shoulders on them. Their heads and faces tend to be a lot larger. The size of the face on the head tends to be a lot larger. Things like hands and feet, weapons are made to be larger so that they can be seen more easily and sort of understood more easily. Yeah, Paul's right. What we did, it was the meteor hammer, so it was just a sphere there. I didn't actually chop it off. I was trying to carve it into an anchor, and then that didn't work, so I just carved it into the spike portion of the anchor. Anyway, like I said, because that grey sea is probably going to be the mid-tone to low tone of the skin, it's a very cool colour. And it's also it's going to end up being toned very light. So I wanted to make sure we're getting enough contrast in the mini that it pops. And like I said, that we have something, we want brighter colours on everything. So I was having a look at this cape. The fur, because it's set in Icewind Dale, is probably going to be a mostly white fur. So it's more that the cape itself is something I want to try and do a darker colour in. That and the pants, and then having light fur on the boots. Because he's not wearing too much else. Goliath's got cold resistance in Icewind Dale, so not really bothered by the Antarctic level temperatures. So what I'm going to do first is we're going to get some paints onto this cloak, and then maybe I will get some skin tones mixed up and we can start doing that, because just looking at the construction of this mini, I don't think I'd want to do too much on anything else before I got that skin tone on. At least a couple base layers of it on. And actually just having a look at the Grey Seer, that might actually be my low tone. I probably don't want to go any darker than that. I was going to mix up in terms of doing a shade on it, do a very dilute Nuln Oil on it, because just raw Nuln Oil over that is going to look kind of gross and icky. One thing to note about this Goliath character, he doesn't have any tattoos, which I'm going to take as a really good thing, because while the idea of freehanding on tattoos on a mini sounds like a lot of fun, it's not really something I want to do when I'm trying to do very interesting skin tones as well. This is a bit of a radial brush. We can do this one first. Get the old paper towel. Now I was having a look before in terms of what colouring I wanted. I'm a massive fan of contrast paints. They're amazing. And you can do a lot with them. I don't really believe in the one thick coat. You can do that. But I'm not a big fan of it. I was having a look at the two of these. These are the two main reds in the contrast line. I'm doing a cape and fur. I'm using contrasts. The Blood Angels red is a bit... it's actually coming over pretty well. It's a very orangey red. A very... it's a cooler red in that term of things. Whereas this is much more of a warm... Got a lot more of the blues in it, turning it to more of a maroon colour. I think that's the one I want, just because I am going to try and offset the cool tones of the skin. And we're going to have a lot of metallic coming through in this chain. I've got to make sure I don't want to be directly over the mat, I want to be in front of the mat. A lot of metallics, cool metallics in the chain, and we're going to have a lot of snow effects on the base. I promise only cool colours, but some of those cool colours may be warm in their palette. I also probably need to get some bigger box lights, because I've got the fancy actual HD cam on the action here. I'm just using the built-in cam on my laptop for the face cam, just because make a little bit of personality. Right. Now this is the weird thing with Hero Forge. Part of there is a bit of a building error on it by the look of it. Let's just get a bit of paint on him. Where some of that armband is clipping through. Oh wow, this is not flowing a ton. So my current plan for this is I don't want it to be super bright red. So I was going to go over this and then either do a couple layers of a shade, of like a light brown shade, a sepia or an earth shade or something. And then, wow, this is almost like Blood for the Blood God level. Pooling. Let's try and get that to smooth out a little. Not a ton. You don't want to contrast paints to smooth out a ton. That's not the point of them. You want to be a little roughshod with them. Let's just get that on the edge there. So yeah, contrast paints are kind of sold as being like one and done, but I like them as a starting point. like the way a lot of other people use bases. Just because it... See, now I'm doing the lovely work of trying to get under the cloak, which is always the most fun. Because you can do a lot of... You can use it as a starting off point for a lot of shading and that. I have actually already primed this, so when I got the mini... Well, we got the mini a little while ago, so I'd been putting off painting it. I have... the other video I've done on this channel so far has been on the floss tube, so cross-stitching related. They talk about having stash shame in terms of the amount of unstitched charts they have or stuff they're not using. They've got nothing on the D&D mini painting. The grey shame that exists is very real. So yeah, I did... I used I think it was Citadel. I think I'm mono Citadel right now, which I've not necessarily always for, but it does get the job done, and it's kind of built for purpose. I don't like their brushes, though. I don't think they do good brushes. Just in terms of what we can get a hold of. Anyway, I did prime him. So this was a resin print, I believe we got a friend of ours to do, just because currently getting a hold of stuff from the States at the moment takes ages and is expensive. And if you can get a friend to do some 3D printing for you, that's always great. And it came out great. It didn't actually need that much in the way of sanding because it was a resin print. There is a little bit of stepping on some of the bits that are coming at odder angles, but that's not that big a problem. And it's not going to show up as soon as we've got a bit of paint on. I think the worst of it was you can kind of see it. Oh, you can't quite see it on the camera. It's blurring out a bit. If you can't see it on the camera, you're not going to see it in real life. It kind of looks like someone's just stuck their finger in the paint. Because you've kind of got... They look almost like contour lines on a map. Yeah, so I didn't have to do much in the way of sanding down. I think there was one spot of that stepping just on the top of the head that was a little bit rough. So I got to polish his dome a little bit. And then I just did the old clean him with a clean toothbrush, soapy water, get all the... Because he'd been handled a bit, especially doing the sculpt work on that. He needed to be cleaned off just because there'd be some residue from the actual 3D print and some residue from me handling him in terms of my hand oils and all of that. So a little bit of soap just to break it up. Water, let him dry. I think I cheated and put him in front of a hairdryer for a little while because I was getting impatient. I'm just putting some Apothecary White, which is not actually a white paint, but is good at making things look like they are white, actually. It's actually just a really light grey. And what it's good at doing is shading things in to look white. So current plan is to... Because nothing is actually white in the world. Not at least to this point. Anyway, I did what's called a zenithal highlight on him, which is... Sounds very fancy. It took me a little while to get a hang of it, but I'm actually pretty happy with this one, because I've done some dodgy zenithal highlights. But the idea is he was actually fully primed in black first. You can kind of see on the underside there, and you would have seen on the cape. And you can kind of see on the underside of the rock. On his butt a little bit. And then I did a pretty heavy zenithal highlight from the top in white. So the idea wasn't that I wanted to be a very stark difference, but I wanted there to be a difference, just a little bit, which is one of the reasons using the contrast paints over that is really good, because all I've done is one layer of contrast paint. Underneath that cape is not somewhere that the contrast would pool and get darker naturally, but because it's a darker, darker base coat underneath it, darker priming, it's done half the shading work for me. And this isn't fine art. It can be fine art, but this is trying to get something that helps inspire players. Helps them sort of stretch their imagination and be more invested in their characters. Now, like I said, I want this red to be pretty dark. I think I'm going to go in with another coat of the red, just to even it out slightly. It's a little splotchy paint-like. Actually, no, I did give this Apothecary White a great shake. Because Apothecary White, any of the contrasts that are particularly paler tend to split something awful. And this is where you learn exactly what the sculpt of the mini is doing. And you try and figure out, is that a tuft of fur or is that a bit of tooth necklace? It looks enough like a tuft of fur that that's what it's gonna be. Because I can make choices in this. Okay. So I pretty much... Seeing that makes me think it's like, oh, I can cheat and do... That's kind of the coloration I want for the body. But I'm going to challenge myself and not contrast the body. Just because flesh tones, I think you can get some more interesting stuff out of it if you freehand it, if you've got the time. And this is a hero mini. This is a player mini. It deserves a bit of love and attention. And look, like, this guy's got some abs. He needs some love for those abs. Okay. Let's put that right. People talk about drinking their paint water or dipping their brush into their tea. I tried to dip my brush into my mic. I should also, I have a beverage for tonight. Put that somewhere more reachable. If you're watching, absolutely start crafting along. Do something. Pick up... I know I've got a couple followers already from the cross-stitch community. Grab some stitching. If you're in Melbourne, you have no reason not to be doing crafting of any sort. We just went in, started a 5-day lockdown. By the way, this one is Flesh Tearers Red, because anyone who's making colorways wants to name them their way. Cross-stitch and floss colors and yarn colors have some of the best names I've ever heard. They need to take a take a leaf out of the mini painting. Citadel in particular, because they've got all the Warhammer IP that they draw from. But other, like, Vallejo I think is pretty boring. I've only got a couple of Vallejo paints here, and they're actually flesh toned, so it's pale flesh, elf skin tone, and bronze flesh tone I've got from Vallejo, which is just a different brand than the Citadel paints. I'm going to try and be, just because on this channel I'm going to try and do a little bit more cross-stitch and a little bit more painting. Sorry, not necessarily as much painting. I don't know, it could be completely cross-platform. I'll try and be a little bit more inclusive when I'm talking about the paints. Also, I think just not people watching this aren't going to be experts at painting. They have other places to go. Okay, so that cape looks so much better. It's very shiny. Like I've got a ring light directly on it, so I'm just going to tilt that away so it's not, you're not just getting the wet paint look. Get out of here. You're still getting a pretty wet paint look. That's a lot more even. And you can see just the little bit of the Apothecary White brings out a bit of dimension on that fur and makes it actually look white as opposed to all the other white on him, which just looks like primer as opposed to a substance that actually exists in the world. Paul, I don't think red paint makes the mica go faster. I think it needs to specifically be a racing stripe, but it doesn't matter what the color is. Okay. Am I going to have to bite the bullet while that's drying and mix up some flesh tones? I think I'm going to have to. let's put the colours I actually used aside so I don't forget what I've used. I didn't use this bit. Oh, yeah, this was an example I pulled out of some of the shades, some particularly that are a little bit more... Is there a pacifying agent, I think, that comes out in some of the lighter colours? This is a Space Wolf's Grey. This is it's a bluey dark grey, but it splits out like this, like crazy, and it's a great example of why you need to shake your paints. I think when I got this one, and when I got the Apothecary White, I spent an evening, because they'd been sitting on a shelf at a game store for... When did these come out? 2017, I think? Yeah, 2017. They'd been sitting on a shelf at a game store for that long. They were just completely separated. And it took an evening of shaking them just to loosen off the bottom. And I think I did actually just get out a brush, stick it in, and wiggle it around. This is my trusty thrown together wet palette. Which... there are definitely fancier wet palettes. Mine is a piece of Tupperware with... I used to use just paper, but I found, for some reason, the paper got mold spots on it more often. This is just like a spongy cloth, I suppose you call it. It's more of a foam cloth as opposed to like a terry toweling one. And this is just a piece of baking paper. And I actually pre-cut a bunch of these of an evening once so that I could, instead of having to wrestle the whole roll. Okay, so I think we decided that the Grey Seer is going to be our base. The Grey Seer is pretty chunky. I'm not going to use that brush. See, this is the decision point. Yeah, see, I said I don't like Citadels that much. I know it doesn't mean too much when they're not wet, but this was a brush I took reasonably good care of, this one in the middle. This is a Citadel, and it hasn't got a good point on it. This one here, it's a brand I really like called Artist's Choice. They tend to have, like, they're a synthetic brush, but they're a pretty good synthetic brush, and they tend to be cut into decent points, and then I think they have got some tapering on the actual fibre themselves. These ones, the Army Painter ones, are by far my favourite. I get them in the set of 3. I think this is my second set. In the Wargamer series, I think it is. Because painting minis, you don't need the tiniest brush. I actually don't use this one that often. This is probably my most used brush ever, just because it forms, especially when it's wet, it forms such a nice point. These are actually sable brushes, so they're not vegan brushes. They're made of sable fur. And this one just, because fur is so tapered towards the end, it forms just such a great point. It's getting a little nasty in the ferrule there, but it's still got some life in it. And this is just it comes with a little dry brush, little angled brush. So I think I'm not going to use those for mixing. Let's get a good hunkin' brush for mixing up enough paint. So, yeah. Thin your paints. We weren't thinning paints before because we were using contrast, and that's a straight out of the pot thing. So I'm gonna grab a heck ton of Grey Seer. I don't want to be running out. That could coat this mini 3 times over the amount I've just put down. Now I could just grab that, but I'm feeling I could just grab some water from my water pot, but it's all kind of red at the moment from washing my brush before. So I'll just use that to rinse my brush, so it's not got any pigment on it, but I don't want to be introducing the pigment in the water to that. So I've got some medium here that I'm just gonna, you can't see it, but it's basically, I could use distilled water, but there'd be some wetting agents in this to help it. Oh, there we are. We're getting some out there. And just gonna mix that in. That's actually a lot, but we've got a lot of Grey Seer here. Okay, I think that's pretty safe to be our base coat for the skin. Oh, look at that. Thick milk, or just milk. Just it's speeding just a tiny, tiny bit, but it's running. That is bang on perfect. There we go. So I'm just gonna put this to the side. You don't need to see that. I have got the ceramite white here, which is just the worst. I need to get some Vallejo. I put a bunch of the medium into the pot because it gunks. Something about the whites in the Citadel range, they don't do it as well. So the whites are always, they're very chalky and claggy and really need to be thinned and pre-mixed properly. So I've said it's my favourite brush. It's not going to behave today. I just know it. So let's actually put this over here so I can load up more easily. And the way I've been doing skin tones, let's not be shy. Let's just start slapping it on his face. There we are. It's very much an additive process. So you're not relying on any show through. I might have to do another. I'll be doing a stain of that. I've just seen a tiny spot I've missed on the fur. So, going to coat this guy completely in the low tone for his skin. And unfortunately, we are going to lose all of that effect I got from doing the Zenithal highlight. But we're going to do the stage makeup, add in more than you'd naturally get. But the good thing is, because this is such a pale man, being a half giant in the Arctic, it's going to be pretty forgiving. I don't think we need to do a second layer of this. Just having a look, it is receding a little bit as it dries, just because we wanted to thin it so much. So we just might want to do a couple little touch-ups. No, I don't need to be so fussy about not hitting anything. It's the point of doing. You want to paint minis inside out. My God, this guy has some lats on him. That's why I want to keep it thin so we can keep him looking shredded. I have complained in the past, particularly about the Reaper range of minis, that their sculpts tend to be a little bit stuck in the 80s. Or, let's be some of them the 70s actually. Their female protagonists, female minis, not necessarily protagonists, are just abhorrently sexualized. It is boob plate city if they have armor on at all. That being said, this is something in terms of masculine objectification. However, it is Paul's character. He designed it in Hero Forge. And I don't want to talk about it because I saw that I don't want to talk about his character and too much because I saw Paul had actually shared it in our D&D group chat that I was going live, and I don't want to give away any secrets about what this character may value and what they may be hiding and if not have shared with everyone else. Because Rime of the Frost Maiden I'm having a lot of fun running it. It's been a little bit tricky because it starts off very, very broad. And there's probably about 10 or 12 different conspiracies that your party can really get their teeth into and explore in all the different towns. It starts off in a region of Icewind Dale called 10 Towns, where there's 10 towns. All with their own little quest lines, characters, that sort of thing. But some of them can be not really connect to each other. And not make an interesting through plot. And really what I had to do, and maybe I didn't have to do this, I could have decided for them, but this is my first time DMing, so I just kind of went as written. See, this is the tricky bit. This is right up under the cape. Luckily, who on earth is picking up the mini and looking here? That's not how we use them. As long as we get... it doesn't look like it disappears behind the cape, we're doing our job. Am I gonna have to paint nipples? Is YouTube gonna really not like that? Because, yeah, both would be on display here. And it is very cold. It is, where they are, it's the equivalent of about minus 25 degrees Celsius, and they're in the warmer part of the area at the moment. Anyway, I started, like, reasonably just like, okay, here are a bunch of different things. If you ask about things, you'll get even more information. A bit of an information flood for the players, unfortunately. But luckily now, they've, unfortunately, there's no actual modelling of the nipples, Paul. I can't let the mini tell me what to do. It would, it's not a thing I thought I'd have to consider. What they'd look like on a Goliath. That's a side of D&D I tend to avoid. However, I am sure... oh, yeah, you can see there just how dark that is and how... oh. Should maybe go for a... yeah. You can really see where the paint stopped much more easily there because it's so much darker. Which means I can't fudge it quite as much. But yeah, we tend to avoid such topics in our D&D games. Okay. So yeah, they've gotten to the point where they've really locked into a couple of different storytelling parts of the story. So, storytelling parts of the story. They've locked into a couple of different threads in the early campaign now that I can continue on, and I think I can link in pretty solidly to the late game. Which, if any of you have read Rime of the Frost Maiden, can be a little tricky. Or have run it. Oh wow. That's, Hero Forge minis are very delicate. So I'm going to put that aside. And that can be easily fixed later. Because that's not the first time that's happened to this character. And I may have another one of the characters from this campaign in a box there, which is missing the top of his staff currently, that needs to be glued back on. But this is actually how a lot of Warhammer painters do it. They actually have unassembled minis that they then paint so that they can get behind things. Yes, F Paul. Also, if you're watching this, you're probably aware of a little show called Critical Role. I'm pretty sure in the finale of that, in the emotional finale, you have one of the guests desperately supergluing his mini back together halfway through the fight. It's all in the tradition. See, now I'm second guessing myself. I don't think this is necessarily a low tone. I think this is a good mid-tone. Sometimes you just have to get the paint on there and get it in contexts to understand what you're looking at. So, in that case, because it's so thin, and because we've got such really great 3D printed detail that I want to preserve, I don't actually want to go over it in a darker color. I think I'm going to try and get that... I think I'm going to try and Frankenstein a shade. So the idea with shades in mini painting is that, the way it was explained to me, and this may be entirely inaccurate, is that paint has basically three elements to it. It has the medium, so the stuff it's in, that like makes it wet and paint-like. You have the pigment, and then you have an opacifier to make it opaque. Shades basically are that, but they don't have an opacifying agent. So they'll only show up where they pool, and then just slightly darken where they don't. So the idea is that they pool in crevices, which is kind of what we want for this character. Okay. Just trying to get him in different angles, just so I can see if I've missed anything. The first version of the model Paul showed me of this, his character, whose name is Kai, Kai Steadyfish, I believe. We don't actually use his surname, his nickname that often. It's not his surname. He doesn't have a surname. The first model he had, he was actually wearing the sandals that went with these spiked greaves. So they were spiked at the front and were sandals. He had his toes out. And I was like, I don't care if he's cold resistant. He's not cold immune. You can't walk around in the snow in sandals. That I'm making an executive decision that doesn't make sense in the world I'm running. Which I think it's a thing that I had to get used to, is saying no to players and saying that, like, no, that's not a thing that can happen here. That I think not shutting them down when they're having, like, with the thing that they're having fun with is important, but for the world to work, you need to have boundaries. You need to have an amount of rules. And when I say rules and logic, it's not necessarily, they don't have to be hard and fast. In fact, part of the rules can be that there is a bit, like, there is a slapstick element to it, that you have there are certain situations when you are allowed to bend and break the rules. If it's, say, for slapstick, it'd be like for a comedic effect or for visceral, like, action. So you can literally jump the shark if it's cool enough. However, sandals did not hit it. Yeah. Yeah, in terms of just trying to stop the shades pulling poorly, I think the old-fashioned way, like old school gamers in the 80s would do it, was they'd get the mini, not on a fancy hand like this, but they'd dunk it in the shade, and then that would be all they do. You can kind of manage it on the mini a little bit, in terms of picking it up and moving around. However, you don't want to do it too much, otherwise you do get water lines, sort of high tide marks. Okay. So, as I said, that's going to be our mid-tone. We want to start working it up. Now, I know this ceramite white is going to be pretty nasty. So I've got like a little scraper. Oh wow, that's pretty bad. Like, I can almost stand this upright in it. Yeah. It's pretty gloopy, even with all that extra medium in it. So just gonna, eek. Also, one of the great things about Hero Forge Minis, I didn't have to do any basing on this. I didn't have to glue any kitty litter to him. He's already got a gorgeous base on him already. That being said, it will be covered up with snow effect. Well, you cannot read that at all, white on white. It's called Valhallan Blizzard, and it is this very, makes this very roughed up snow effect that can go. Ooh, that's just me tapping my nail on it. Yeah. Okay. Ooh, that is. You can see just how rough that is. We had an excellent wargaming store near us, but unfortunately they've closed down due to general state of things. And they're like completely closed. They're not doing deliveries or anything like that. And they had like the full range of Vallejo paints. They had full range of Reaper minis and like massive store in terms of mini painting. Whereas we've got a lot of local gaming stores which, while they have like a good Citadel range and maybe even like a little bit of army painted, they won't have a big rack of rattle cans and stuff like that. Yeah, so yeah, just got to massage your ceramite white into working. I think I've got another like 2 pots of this just because I expect there to be a lot of loss in it. There we go. Okay, that's probably enough. I'm gonna just start putting some of that on the palette because it will get worked a bit on the palette. What I'm probably going to do is actually leave the clumping alone. And just with my mixing brush, try and pick up that medium that is kind of pigmented. This is why I have a mixing brush, because it gets all over it. This is not a brush I care about, but I can clean it. Okay. Okay. So I want to work into the grey, just so that I'm building that up. Yeah, I don't want to be moving grey into the white, otherwise it's going to be too big a step. But I move white into the grey. Like, that's a pretty decent transition. I mean, we want to get this poppy. I think I get a little bit gun shy in terms of transitioning. Considering I'm probably going to do a little bit of highlighting work just in the straight ceramite white, I kind of want to make sure I'm getting a full range in the palette. I tend to be a bit gun shy seeing too much of a contrast on a mini, just because it's hard to see that sort of stage makeup-y look up close. Yeah, I like the whites. I was talking before about the contrast paints, and just how much they split. You can see on that one. But the whites are hella clumpy. By the way, Alec is the other Goliath in our party, so represent. Okay. Now, it is scientifically proven that alcohol will reduce hand tremors, or at least in the variety that I have them, so I use it to counteract all the caffeine I've been having, which is a necessity, unfortunately. Therefore, the whiskey is necessity. Okay. Now, that's pretty liquid, so let's just dry that brush off a little bit. So I think we can be pretty cartoony with this. Gosh, I may even want a smaller. Just filling up those volumes without going into the edges. And just, I'll probably grab the darker grey at some point, just to help with that blend a little bit, because I am not someone who knows how to wet blend. Probably not gonna do too much under here. Might just do a little hint that you got lats under there. But yeah, I've got a pretty lightly loaded brush. I don't want too much going on in there. Actually, I'm going to switch out because this brush has got a pretty decent belly on it. It's just picking up a lot of paint. Oh, just hidden. There we go. So, just getting the smaller brush, which doesn't have as much of a belly, so it's not going to be pulling out a bunch of paint as soon as that surface tension is broken. Let's just... There we go. Sometimes you just got to fill out some Goliath chest. Just breaking the object down into different shapes and basically just tracing on all those muscle groups the inner bit of the shape and letting that low tone, that mid-low tone that we've got, outline it. So here I'm just tickling on his abs, just giving him a little tickle along the top of his abs. And I got to remind myself, ooh, how does one shade a belly button? I'm not quite sure. Lynn, no, it wasn't proven on a Mythbusters episode, the alcohol thing that was, it was suggested to me by a neurologist, in fact. Um, in fact, it's not bigger brushes, that necessarily make it better. There's sort of an obsession with mini painting of just trying to get the teeniest, tiniest brush possible. But it's sort of, if you get a big brush that's got a fine point, you can you can do a lot of work with that. The thing is, I want the small brush for now is that I don't want when you put the point of the brush on the mini, it basically breaks the surface tension with all that paint, especially since this is a very watered down paint we've got. It's very fluid. That you can have a bit of it running out of the brush onto the mini, which I don't want. Let's try and get a point on that bicep so it's looking shapely. There we go. I'm gonna say I've done a bit of streaming work onto Twitch, and streaming onto YouTube has been much easier. No, you don't want to overwater the paints. Milk. The consistency of milk was always the advice given to new painters that people give. So this is like definitely on the thinner side, just because I want to have a little bit more control over it. I want there to be a bit of show through, just because we're blending in skin tones, which is... I want a bit of forgiveness on that. And because we're dealing with some finer details, where let's just rake across the knuckles, get those showing up. Almost dry brushing them. There we go. Yeah, I want the thinner paint just so it's not overwhelming all of these really great fine details we've got on the Hero Forge Mini. On just I've seen some, in terms of Hero Forge prints that were not done at Hero Forge, this one's just fantastic. The whole lot we got out of this, apart from obviously being somewhat fragile. I'm probably actually gonna paint it all and then glue it together at the end, is my current plan. Just been great. Yeah, maybe just don't make a lot of dingly-dangly bits. Now, trying to get into a position where I can brace my hand well enough to do his chrome dome. There we go. Just patter on the head. And let's not make him look like he's wearing a bald cap. This is all going to go pretty much in the lighter tone. I'm just kind of not quite dry brushing over his face, just to keep the low tone in some of those places. But you kind of want the closer you are to the face, you want it to be lighter, even if... Unless you're doing something very fancy and artistic. If you're just doing something that needs to be quick referenced, you want it to have it lighter and more detailed the closer you are to the face. Or whatever is will naturally draw the eye, which in any kind of vaguely humanoid, vaguely animal, vaguely sentient creature is going to be the face. If you have something like a dragon, people will be looking at its face, but you'll probably be looking at like its wingspan and that kind of thing. But it's still definitely getting directed towards the face a lot more. So, I'm looking here. We've been going for 45-50 minutes. I'm probably going to try and finish up the skin tone and then call it there, just so that these aren't going super long. And yeah, if these are fun, I'm going to try and do these a bit regular. I want to try and... I don't know, I've been excited about producing content, whether that's doing the YouTube video or, last week or doing the stream this week, so I kind of want to do something every week at the moment, but I don't want to make myself too much of a hard and fast rule. See, this is why I say I know I get a little bit gun shy, because as soon as that's dried, because it's no longer shiny against the matte background, it's the contrast is actually blended in quite a lot more. So you really can ham it up a bit. A lot more than at least my sensibilities will allow. So let's make sure these lights get some love. Let's bring that back into the frame. But yeah, like I said, I'm having fun doing this at the moment, so I want to do it more. And I don't have a lot of, if I do showing off cross stitches every week, I'm not going to be showing big differences, which is less interesting. Oh, got to get the Savage V, as it were. Got to make sure that gets some definition. Just really objectifying this gentleman as I do some painting on him. Get just a bit more of a highlight. This is, I'll have to bring it on next time I do this, but I did it was like a troll mini that I got really cartoony on the highlighting of his skin. I thought it turned out really well. It helps that he's green, that it does suspend your disbelief a bit, that you're not expecting really smooth blends of skin. So if you see a very very obvious brush marks on it that aren't blended in, if they're done with some kind of what appears to be artistic choice, which I'm going to say it was, I'm not going to say it wasn't, then you can kind of get away with that. Okay. So you know, now I'm looking at this, I'm liking just the straight grey sear as the low tone, if we are planning on doing a bit of a shade over the top of it. Let's just get a little bit more love, because he's got a Brock Lesnar neck going on. Just got some shoulders going there. Let's not try and not whack the camera with my. Okay, so I'm not gonna try and do any highlight on that side under his chin here, because that's in the way and no one's gonna see that. Let's just get so along the brow line. Anyone who's ever done a good highlight knows the points. It's like tip of the nose, tip of the chin, and hey, if I was bald, I'd just give a good sweep of highlight all over my dome. Wouldn't you? In terms of lighting source on this, I haven't really thought of one. I'm not getting really specific above just general vertical illumination. I don't think we need to on a Hero Mini. Unless I'm doing like a bust or something, I don't think I need to. Or some serious special effect of like an object source in the mini emitting light. I don't think I need to get too much more invested in directional lighting. You can have some studio lights that are giving him a good overall gentle coverage. Yeah. Which it makes sense. Higher on the mini, the head, it's not going to have as many of these lower points as we have on the abs. And we've even got, just layer up some more of that mid-tone we've got now. Just sort of building it in. Paul was doing a bit of painting the other night. He was running a one-shot for some friends of ours. And I think he's a fantastic painter, but he can be a little bit down on his abilities. But I think he got really excited the other night. He was painting some mycosynths. I always call them myconids. I call them mycosynths, but they're myconids. And he said, yeah, I was painting them and putting on a color. I was like, oh yeah, they're green now. Oh, put a bit of brown on them. Feeling a bit down on it. And then he said he got to one point and just put like one extra bit. He's like, oh, these look like actual guys now. Ooh, that was really good. And it's when you get this changing point of like, I'm putting paints on the mini to suddenly, this is going the correct way. It's very satisfying. And I'm really excited he got to have that. So I'm just going to unload a bit more of that Ceramite White. Just get that in there. And this is already, because I dumped a good pretty much half and half blended the medium into this already, just because it was so clumpy. This does not need to be watered down. You can see it's already that milk consistency. And we're just going to I'm actually going to bring that into here because it's pretty, I just want to suggest that there's some grey in it to get a good highlight colour. Just a mere suggestion that it's not straight white. As I said, nothing is straight white. We've just plopped on some Apothecary Grey onto that. Because I don't want it too close to the skin tone, I'm actually going to do a brown shade on that, as opposed to the black grey shade we're going to do on the skin. Okay. So this is where we can get really cartoony and brushstrokey with the highlighting. Okay. And this is where my brush misbehaves and doesn't want to form a tip. There we go. Let's start here. And yeah, because it's coming out wet, it's always looking... Now, is that fur? Or is that meant to be cape? Or have I just said that's an additional bit of delt? I think we're going to say that's just some delt. That's how built he is. It probably is supposed to be, as I said, you can see how this is clipped through the cape. I think this little section here was supposed to be an extension of the cape. I can change my mind and just put a bit more red there if I want. There we go. And like I said, just a little suggestion on that. I'm really not doing a lot with this highlight. Not trying to build up anything, just trying to get a little bit of a suggestion. And I've got Toggle telling me I need to be tracking what I'm doing. It's the weekend, Toggle. I don't need to track what I'm doing at all. Just give a nice curve onto that bicep. Just a little glint on each of the abs. Yeah. Yeah, as I'm really trying to... I keep talking about it, but it's because I want to reinforce it with myself. That we're not looking for perfect, we're not looking for high art, we're looking for... Well, in D&D we're looking for functionality, but we're looking at something that's fun, and we think we're making something magical. And I think I'm doing that. I think I'm living up to that. Okay. And like I said, we want to go a little bit brighter on the head. This guy's not getting a tan. I don't know what it is about scalps, but they tend to be pretty pale, even if the person's not had hair for a long time. Don't know why. Scalps just don't tan, I guess. They're not made for that. No one expects to have to tan their scalp. You can definitely get a bit too focused on a mini, and definitely have to, like, sometimes even like for a whole night you have to put it down, come back to it another day to actually make sure you're seeing all the parts of it correctly. So here I think we're a little too... Let's pick up some of that, blend it in. I think we're a little too linear here. Let's pull that in a bit. So you say I don't do wet blends, and then I attempt to do one live on stream. It's a little one. There we go. That looks a little softer. Okay. I think we... So the problem with working low to high, when you start pretty high to begin with, I'm working with straight white here. There's not too much I can do. However, it is pretty thin, so layering is a thing. And we're not at pure white yet on him in any sense of the word. I'm going to get... It's got just such great facial structure for a mini. I've been working on the WizKids minis, and they're great. I really like some of the newer stuff they're coming out with. But they can get some janky molds. They're you can get some guys that look through that like they've been through some serious fights when they come out of the packet. A little bit more here. And I'm just having a think. I kind of want to do this axe as like a copper-headed axe, as opposed to a just like in a Leadbelcher dark grey, silvery color. I think that'd look great as a copper axe with copper accents. And I might do... I think I like the idea of, doing copper, like spikes on everything, copper hardware on all of this. And then, on that chain coming out, which is sitting over here now, you can see you can actually see the previous repair that was done on it. And the lovely green stuff job. That one's definitely going to be pretty much a dark grey. There's, in terms of tear with the knee, there's not a tear in the knee. He has got a little bitty, he's got a little bitty patch on his pants. He's got a patch there. He's not going to have blue jeans, no. I think, as I was saying, I definitely didn't pop colours so much when I first started painting minis, and I think I've got to find my first mini I ever painted with just like out of the tube acrylic paints. It's so gloopy, but I think I did about 7 different shades of brown on him, and it was on a halfling rogue character, so it was probably about this big, and when you looked at it on a table from 6 feet away, it just looked a mess. It looked like a little brown blob. These are heroic characters. They're cartoons. They need to look like it. So I want to let that skin settle for a little before I start touching it with washes. So what we can do is a little bit more on the cape. And we're going to get out the good old reliable liquid talent that is Seraphim Cypria. So this is the paint that doesn't have any opacity to it. And because... that's pretty dry. That's dry enough. It's not gonna lift. Let's just get this real thick. Now this guy got tipped over at a communal paint meeting, so just really globbing it on there, and then you'll see why it's called liquid talent. So I'm just putting this in this white fur so it looks a bit dirtied up, and you can really play around with the surface tension of it. So water it down, and I don't want it quite that dark in the fur, so I'm just going to pick it up a little bit, just let the capillary action of the brush pull it off. And because it's fur, it's a little less likely to pick up those high water marks. And this is, the great thing that you can see, all I did was lay down flat paint on this. It's not quite coming to so much along the camera, but these beautiful shaded dark lines. I might cheat a bit and actually hold this guy upside down when I shade him, because I want to get a couple more. I don't want it to pool so much just at the very bottom. I want to get that pooling all along these bits. You can see that's almost straight away improved that. Yeah. You can really take a lot of the effort out and let the mini do the work for you and accentuate the parts of it you want brought out without having to do it yourself. Let's pull a little bit more off all of this. Just spread that out a bit more. So that actually browned up that fur a lot more than I thought it would. But I'm pretty happy with that. I was thinking more of a... Oh, I think that's... Is that supposed to be like a face in the fur, or am I just anthropomorphizing things? Quite possible. So yeah, I might dry brush a... Oh, let's stay on screen. I might dry brush a white onto the fur just because I don't want it quite that brown. I want it to highlight a bit more stark white, and I just want it to look kind of like it's got an undercoat of colour in it that's not completely monochrome. Yeah. So yeah, if I was to hold it pretty stationary, you can see it pulls towards the ends of these, but holding it this way, let it just pull along those edges as it dries. And I kind of want, I'm kind of okay with this cape getting a little blotchy looking. It's on a Goliath barbarian. It's seen some wars. It's not stayed perfectly scarlet. He's had this for a few years. Just I'm not going to bother getting the underside because it's got that. I'll just cover up those little white splotches. It's already got that zenithal highlight helping it, and no one's going to look at it. Just don't want to have any sort of appearance of hard lines. You can see I'm putting a lot of product onto this and just making sure it's shifting around. You don't want to over worry it, which I'm getting to the point of doing. I'm just going to hold them there for a little while. And turn him the other way, so and then turn him down. Just moving around. Because yeah, light is not affected by gravity as much as fluid is. So I'm trying to have this this product do the work of light, but it is doing the work of fluid. So I have to kind of trick it. Look at that. Look how gorgeous that looks. It's all shiny, so of course it looks great. But just it's the reason I love a couple coats of contrast paint and then a shade over the top. Definitely not one thick coat. Now, I don't actually think I'm going to highlight or do any dry brushing on that cape yet. I think I'll just do the dry brushing on the fur, and I think I'm definitely going to put some of that snow effect on the shoulders. I think as if it's just fallen on there. Okay, we can't, so definitely do not want this for the skin tone. Now I actually have two black shades. This one is a gloss, which I'm trying to figure out how to use. I think just I think the best time to use it is if it's active, like it's really glossy. But I think it only comes across if I don't seal the mini. Because these are minis that get played with, they get touched, they get used, they need sealant on them. Just to toughen them up a bit. Now, I'm actually going to grab, because trying to mix shade on a wet palette is going to be a bit of a losing battle. I've just got a jar lid here. Yeah, using this straight, it's going to be way too dark. As I said, we're starting pretty light on him. And you can kind of see, we've basically just made a more even version of the highlight. So, grab a mixing brush. Yep, that's clean. And I'm just going to pull off a bunch of this into the lid. And I'm banging the hell out of the camera. Okay, that's going to be plenty. Now, I know there's ways to water it down in the brush, which is a very watercolorist. I've done that when I've done watercoloring, where you'll blend out a color that you're using by like badly washing your brush. But because I want to be a little bit finicky about it, I want to actually pre-water it down. So just picking up. I really need to get a pipette. And I'm just using straight water at this point. The medium is a little thick. Oh, let's get the cat hair out of there. The special medium stuff I was using to thin before, it is a bit thick for this, and would make it gloop up a little bit, and I really want a much subtler effect than that. There we go. Maybe a bit more. Black is a persistent and insistent pigment. You really have to thin it a lot more than you think you do to try and desaturate it. What it might do is, there we go. Where you're starting to be able to see through it. I'm maybe not gonna mix that too much. I'm not going to use that big a brush for it as well. So, let's not dry my brush, let's use that. Oh, that looks good. I'm happy with that. Let's start somewhere. It doesn't matter too much. There we go. And it's very much, I can, oh. See, that shade has licked down onto the arm. So I've got my wet palette over here, so my stuff hasn't dried out. I'm just gonna cheat a bit and put that there. Let's just cover that up with the mid-tone. Okay. But yeah, I can add pigment to the mini, but it's really hard to take it away. Yeah, pretty much whenever you get wet paint onto a mini, in any capacity, it always looks kind of awesome. Especially when it's the shades, just because you get that reflective quality at all your highlights plus the pigment in the shade. So it will die down a little bit, but one of the reasons you also don't want to worry it too much on the mini, just suck that up, is that you can start, because you've got moisture and agitation on your base coats, you can start lifting up your base paints after we spent all that work getting them on there. Boop-a-doo. Just patter on the head. Just gonna lift a little bit out of a couple crevices where gravity is doing a bit too much work. But other than that, I don't want to do too much on it. How are we looking? Yeah, I think I need to, just for it to come across on camera, I think grey on grey, not the best. So I'm just going to pick up from some of the more concentrated areas on here. Just introduce a bit more of that. Again, just holding them horizontal. Now, one of the best bits of advice I got recently was from the YouTube channel Uncle Adam's Minis, I think it's called. It's called Uncle Adam. Atomic Minis. And he says he does more wargaming armies, so he doesn't quite do hero figures or like art pieces. And he's just like, yeah, for eyes, look, if you do a good set of eyes on like a big monster, it looks great, but on a human scale or slightly larger than human scale, getting accurate eyes is just such not worth it. That's not. So he just like, yeah, just flood, if you got good defined eye sockets, just really flood them with your shade. So usually I'd be using like an Ajax Earth shade or a Flesh shade, but because we're keeping this guy pretty, we don't want any warm tones on his skin. I'm just using that watered down Nuln oil, just really getting it into his eyes. So you can see that sculpt, but we're not going to worry about trying to draw on pupils or anything like that. Yeah. So I think I'll leave the stream there for the night, just because we're a bit over an hour now, and I think that's pretty long enough for a replay. I think my plan, just because we've got a wee bit of a lockdown in Melbourne at the moment, is I'm going to do a little bit more work on this guy, and maybe come back to him next week sometime, because he will not be needed on the table on Wednesday, because we're not allowed to play in person, but I definitely want him done by the Wednesday after. Anyway, I hope you all have a good night. Bye!